Hello all, welcome to today's webinar, HR in the time of COVID-19. I'd like to welcome today's speakers, David Fitzgibbon of Cregg Recruitment and Maria Gilson of Melior Management. We hope you enjoyed today's session. Should you have any questions or queries, please include them in the chat feature or in the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screens. I'd like to now hand over to David Fitzgibbon.
Thanks, Quiva. I hope everyone can hear me. Very strange doing these things online. I've been on a number before where I've attended, but it's interesting to try and do this where you can't see the responses, the faces. But I'll keep an eye on you, Maria, to see how we're doing. But look, thanks to Dee and Quiva, obviously, for the opportunity to work with Maria in respect to the topic for today. Look, as an employer myself, you know, I recognise the importance of the actual topic and the importance of obviously effectively, you know, managing HR processes and issues, you know, during this period of time. We have 5 office locations. I suppose when initially the whole response to the return to work sounds great, I see the workload that's needed to actually facilitate people coming back to work, but also as well from chatting to Maria, I suppose it's not just about returning to work, it's the intricacies of actually, I suppose, as we move beyond this hopefully pandemic, people working from home, you know, and what are the requirements there. This is also for HR professionals and for I suppose the leaders in business. It's on top of an already complex position the companies are in regards to the wage subsidy scheme, reduced hours, temporary layoffs, etc. So I suppose it's great that I suppose the chamber are doing this event because look, a lot of companies may not have HR people on site and may have to make a lot of the decisions based on getting consultation. Myself and Maria chatted through, and I suppose what we want to do is in reality, I think I've only been added to this for gender equality or gender balance. But what we want to do is kind of make it an all-encompassing presentation. But I do appreciate that the reality is that a lot of people are on it just to look and see, well, what are the protocol in regards to HR and planning to return back to work. However, we did kind of, I suppose, we chatted through kind of what are the other areas that people might be interested in, and I suppose over the last couple of weeks, from my point of view as a business, I've been lucky that with client companies, I've seen what a lot of them are actually doing in respect to, you know, restructuring their business or looking at planning for the future. As I said, Maria and Quiva previously, if anyone has one plan that they're going to stick to at the moment, it's going to be very difficult. I think every company has about 5 or 10 plans, depending on what happens between wage subsidy schemes, any of the government initiatives. But I suppose as a business leader, you know, the difficulty always for me was am I making the right decisions, and you know, is it similar to what's happening within the, I suppose, the overall market. Luckily enough, I'd have a few people that I would know within, I suppose, what they would be deemed competitors, but I found that a lot of competitors have now become a lot of, you know, I suppose, compatriots, because we're trying to find out, well, what's the right thing to do to ensure businesses are, I suppose, remain open now and into the future. And it's been very comforting for me to talk to some bigger companies and also smaller agencies out there and see that, look, they're doing the same thing. And I suppose without that lack of, I suppose, communication between, you know, other businesses, you know, you can almost fall into that fear factor element. And I suppose part of this is to try and remove the fear factor, and that's Maria's going to discuss a lot of that. As I said, a lot of businesses don't have access to, you know, the information of what other businesses are doing. So about 2 weeks ago, Cregg Recruitment decided that we would move forward and actually do a survey of companies. So I'm going to start out the presentation today with just giving you some high level. It's very, very much raw data right now, but there's a lot more information, and we'll send it on. Is survey results in regards to, well, what are companies doing right now in respect to returning to work? How are they planning to do it? You know, how do they think it's going to impact their business? And I suppose further to that is what's the general sentiment of companies in relation to, you know, when do they think their business will be back to some level of normality, or as what people are capturing it now, the new norm. So we did that, and look, it's not just Shannon based, or not just Galway or Cork or Kilkenny. We did a national survey, so we've got a very broad spectrum of responses, even a couple from Cavan and Wicklow, so we went out that far. So then we'll move into Maria's piece, which is obviously, you know, the technicalities. I laughed that I looked at Maria's presentation this morning. I'm not great on the PowerPoint slides, so to get her back, I made her a doctor just for today, for those who are eagle-eyed and can see that she's got the stethoscope. And then finally, just I'll discuss in regards to employment trends and kind of strategies that businesses have. So kind of I am conscious of time, and obviously I want to give Maria the vast majority of the space to discuss obviously what's most important for me, because in my discussion with her, I took plenty of notes, and probably took a lot longer than she expected to get through that initial conversation. So just high level results in regards to where we are, and some companies, and the results that companies have are just true. So I suppose, back to work, I suppose 50%, 57% of our respondents have confirmed that they have confirmed the back to work date. I put my hands up. We're probably have the capacity to stay out of work, but not stay out of work, but to work from home. We don't have a date specific yet, so I think a lot of companies are just waiting to see what can they do and how can they do it in an effective manner. Because I think, look, it is about bringing back your people to work in a safe manner, but obviously ensuring that working from home is a safe environment also. Look, obviously we'll send on these results. 67% of the respondents are currently in the process. So that means that what's worrying is that 25% of them are aware of it but have not read it, and 8% are either not aware or just aren't implementing it. And there's certain, and we're breaking all that data down. That may be because they don't see that they can actually physically do it or financially do it. Further to that is that 65% are reviewing work from home policies. Now, I suppose a lot of companies may have answered this on the basis that they're reviewing longer term, what is the opportunity of having people working from home. But look, I suppose without worrying, is Maria will touch on it in respect to, well, what are the technicalities of having somebody working from home. And we are getting feedback that, certain companies, obviously, we hear the larger multinationals are saying that their staff may never come back into a work environment, into a full working environment. But I think the generals, is in the regions, is people are considering, giving the flexibility to work from home. But in a lot of cases, it's on an ad hoc basis. But I think people do want people to come back to work in some way, shape or form. And just kind of the last two ones is that, organizations, as they plan to return to work, this is when they have a date set, when they know what are they actually going to do. So 16% said that they'll have a full return. 36% said that they do a phased return. Split return, what I mean by that is they'll work from home and be on site. So that's an A team and a B team. Certain manufacturing entities will looking at different shifts to make sure that obviously if one person contracts it, it means that obviously the other shift is totally separate. And then the others are 9%. And then finally, I suppose one of the most important bits is how much is it going to cost? How much do people think it's going to cost for them to actually implement these changes? And I suppose 44%, as we can see, said it was going to be sustainable. 50% nearly do believe it's going to be a significant cost to develop the business. I suppose the reality of it is, from what we hear, is that COVID-19 is going to be with us for a considerable period of time. So I don't think it's going to be a matter of we put it in for a number of weeks and it's not going to be used. I think this form of, I suppose, sanitization, obviously safety measures, etc. at work, it's a long-term plan for businesses. But as I said, look, that's some of the higher level results that we got. It's there to kind of give companies, I suppose, an understanding that other businesses are feeling the same. But I think the key thing from today is that just to give you the information and the knowledge, not to scare people, and Maria will obviously cover this in more detail, but it's what do we need to do as employers to ensure that we have effectively put in the measures that keeps our employees safe, and obviously covers ourselves off in regards to any health and safety regulations that are there. So I'm just going to pass over to Maria now, and I'll stop sharing there, Maria.
Thank you. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Very, very pleased to be invited to participate in this webinar. And it's interesting to see the range of businesses that the different participants are from. I think we're all really trying to deal with the same issues from different angles. I guess what I'm going to try and do is give kind of an overview from a HR point of view. Everybody's got a slightly different mix depending on the business. I guess we're all going through a lot of issues. And probably the biggest thing that I think at the moment is that they're not new issues, but they're probably the issue for everybody is that there's so much and it's all so quick. And there are new things to businesses, or they have new flavors of maybe intensity at the moment. But when I was thinking about this, I guess, and we've obviously had lots of conversations with various different clients over the last couple of months. But when I was thinking about it, the first thing that occurred to me actually really was that these are unprecedented times, but they're not unprecedented issues. It's just that there's so much going on at the moment. And at its core, when you deal with any individual issue that comes up, we do still have reference points for that. We have, well, first of all, we have the employment legislation, which is still there. Absolutely almost all of it. I'll mention the one exception that's there. So we do have that kind of responsibility that continues in these times. And obviously there's some flexibility around what's reasonable and what can actually be done. But it is still there. We have good practice. We have emerging better practice, maybe more specifically COVID-19 related. But we've got lots and lots of resources that are there, except that the issues don't present themselves in the form that we're used to seeing. And maybe they're in combination with other issues, and it's trying to weigh up the different priorities that can be the biggest problem, in fact. So I suppose the HR landscape for all of us, and I'm not going to talk through all of this, but we've all been through this roller coaster of the COVID-19 situation emerging, the phases from the government point of view, then what that meant from our own individual businesses, and the decisions that had to be made, the supports that were there for people. And I've put the acronyms in there because I think for some people there can be confusion around which is which, and certainly the fact that the temporary wage subsidy scheme happens to be a TWSS and the STWSS is the normal short time support scheme for people on short time can be confusing. Obviously then we're back at this point into looking to return to work, and lots of businesses they haven't stopped work. In fact, they've just moved what they did, maybe a very small number of people still on site, if they're an essential business, maybe everybody working from home, or maybe they've been completely closed. And I know there was an excellent webinar on that very recently, which I attended, which Optima Training and Consulting ran. And so I'm not going to go into the health and safety aspects, and we're not health and safety consultants, but that protocol is an excellent resource, I think, for anybody. And anybody who's scared to go near it, it's very readable. And there's lots of really practical steps in it, so it's well worth looking at. And obviously at this stage it's a requirement to look at it, but I would even say, even if you've got other people within the business who are officially looking after the health and safety issues, it is still worth reading through. It's a very, very readable document for everybody involved in the workplace. We have the new ways of working then, and it's not that remote working and flexible working are new, they're not, but they've probably come to the fore for a lot of organisations that maybe would never have considered remote working before. And now it's just a matter of survival. If that's not the way you work, then there is no work to be done. And of course, there are practical arrangements then in terms of staggered start and finish times. But the biggest thing I think for most people is everybody talks about the new normal, and it's very hard to actually work out what is the new normal going to be. And it's possibly, I think, a concern for people that if we go back to the first box there, the fact that the government phases are starting to say that you can go back to work, for a lot of people, they feel, I think, then that this means that we should now be back to whatever was normal before, but it isn't really normal, but we should be back to the prior, let's say, to the emergency measures coming into force. So I think the first thing that I would say to everybody to remember is you don't have to be finished now. Just because the phasing allows you to resume does not mean that you have to resume to the full extent the way you were. So you still have to work out what makes sense from a business point of view, and that's obviously a combination of the current COVID-19 kind of landscape, let's say, and the protocol, and it's also from business point of view, and it's going to change, and the phasing may change. The government have told us there may well be moves backwards along the paths as well as forward. So there will be measures that will change. There are certainly things that have been mooted that haven't actually been finalised in terms of policy and regulation around, for example, temperature testing and things like that. So we know there are going to be more changes, and whether we get to the new normal in a month or 6 months or a year is still open. And I guess the biggest thing that I think employers need to realise is that we don't know everything now, and it's okay not to know everything now. So it's not that everybody else knows what their new normal is and you just don't know yours yet. And I think we are all working through this together, and that's an important thing to bear in mind. When we've been looking at issues, I guess what I've thought is, in a way, while I'm saying we have reference points, we do have lots and lots of good reference points, but you've almost got to think your way through some issues and back to first principles. So here we obviously have the overriding health and safety obligation to protect employees, customers, the general public, anybody that comes, that is impacted by the work that our businesses do. We have data protection obligations, which are obviously there all the time, as our health and safety obligations. At the moment, we're obviously looking for more information from people, perhaps, than we would ever have done in relation to their own personal data from a medical perspective, and maybe other information in relation to their home environments, for example, which we might get into later on, and even information in relation to their family members, if we're asking if you've vulnerable family members at home or household members. So there are very important data protection obligations to remember, and we need to remember about those, or to consider those when any issues coming up for review in terms of deciding what to do. But fundamentally, I think people need to remember also that you have the right to manage your own business, and that doesn't mean that you have to blow a whistle and go back to normal just because the government says you can go back to normal, or go back to for example, having employees working on site. So that may or may not make sense, but you don't have to do it just because you are allowed to do it. And I guess always, from an employer's point of view, there's the responsibility to act reasonably. And when we sometimes come to difficult situations from a HR point of view, we're often looking at, well, what would the reasonable employer do? What is reasonable to do here? And I guess, that's, if you like, that's an important thing for all of us to remember in the decisions that we're making, is to try and think, well, what is reasonable? And that is actually an important consideration. It might be, enshrined with the same rigidity maybe that other obligations are from an employer's point of view, but we are expected to act reasonably, and that in itself gives you, if you like, scope to decide what is reasonable in these particular circumstances when you are weighing everything up, and maybe you think one obligation may conflict with another one, for example. But I guess the most important thing is there is no requirement to have a crystal ball, which I think at the beginning we all felt, oh my goodness, are we supposed to know? And certainly when you're, interacting with employees, now particularly actually more than maybe even earlier, they'll probably feel, do you not know, or can you tell me? And you may not actually know, and it's okay not to know. It's actually fine to be saying, look, we don't know. We'll tell you what we do know, and we've a plan in place for now, and this is the way we're going to approach it, but we're keeping it under review. If there are changes, we'll let you know. If there's information that comes to light, or if there's change in government guidance, if good practice changes and things develop, well, we'll be implementing those. So we don't have to know right now, and we can't tell you what way we'll be fixed in October. If somebody wants to know that, and I think that can be difficult for employees. They can feel that somebody somewhere does have all of these answers, and I know certainly in relation, for example, to the temporary wage subsidy scheme, I think that was a good example where lots of people had lots of questions and just couldn't believe that their employer didn't know the answer to this one yet, because it was being worked out as we all went along, and as particularly, I suppose, in that case, as revenue developed, what was great support in a very short space of time. So I think what's particularly new for COVID-19, and I'm not telling you anything I think that you don't already know, is the whole issue of childcare. And if there's anything that's unprecedented, it's probably the extended period of time for which there has been no childcare available, no creches, no schools, and for a lot of people, none of their backup supports. So, where they have had parents, grandparents, other relatives who would have been able to step into the breach and provide backup support, for various reasons, they may not have been available. And that obviously for a lot of people would normally have driven a request for remote working. Remote working in itself, because it became a reality for a lot of people from a business point of view, has probably assisted people in the childcare area, although there still can be huge issues for people. Of course, it's very difficult to work remotely with very, very small children. So, we have to be cognizant of the remote working, being flexible about what expectations there are around that in terms of what is actually reasonable for an employee to be able to do. But remote working itself will probably continue for a period of time. For a start, remote working is in the government plan up until phase 5. And we might remember back to the Taoiseach's statement. He didn't ask employers to allow their employees to work remotely. He asked the citizens to work from home if you can. So, we are facilitating all of our employees and ourselves in complying with the government requirements and requests of the citizens of the state. And that's still in force, even if your business may be able to open up, where you have people to work remotely or are able to work remotely, then obviously there is still that, if you like, that compliance with the government overall phasing plan still there for a lot of people. Another thing that has come up, and it's not that it will have never come up before, but probably it would have been an issue maybe in industries that might have been, for example, maybe food-related industries, but on-site suspect case management. And suspect sounds as though, we're all going to turn into Gardaí with criminals on site, but obviously what it actually means is, somebody feels unwell at work and it would appear to be, or potentially has a COVID-19 aspect to it. Maybe they're the symptoms, and the issue of having an isolation room and being able to move them to that quickly, having procedures for around how you do that so you minimize their contact with other people. That's probably something very new to a lot of individual businesses, but as I say, not something that certain organizations would have had before. So again, there's resource that we can draw from in relation to that. And as I say, that protocol, for example, has information on that. But we do need to be careful about the protection of the information in relation to an employee who may actually come into that category where we are moving them into isolation, and we can't go around and tell everybody, well, that person's sick, because that's medical information, sensitive data. So I guess the back to the original principles that I was talking about, when you look at an issue like that, you've got to be thinking in the round about, well, what are the various different angles on that one. We've got the temporary accommodation of health issues, and I think that's new because I'd imagine most employers at this stage have come across an employee situation where they have a health issue, and the issue is, can you accommodate that issue in the workplace? So, someone has had a back injury, or they have had some other health issue, and we're doing medical assessments, traditionally doing medical assessment, assessing, well, what is the advice in relation to the job, and if they can work, what are the accommodation requirements that they have, and can we accommodate those needs? And this is a little bit different in that we may welcome, to the situation where we have an employee who actually has a medical issue which puts them at higher risk if they do contract COVID-19, and therefore where it might be more advisable for them to be more isolated, or to work from home, or to have different procedures or different work, maybe less interaction with the public, whatever. And that's a new one, because I think we probably haven't really had much experience as employers. It's happened before, I am sure, but most employers wouldn't have come across that as much, in terms of how do you work through the temporary accommodation of health issues. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, for all of us, the record keeping and data protection are very important always, but the fact that sensitive medical information is being collected on a much more regular basis. So for a start, the advanced return to work form looks for information on people's medical histories as well as their personal ones. They may not be giving any information at all, but they may well be giving information about symptoms, for example. So we need to be more cognizant of that. So that's been there, but not maybe with as much of a spotlight on it as it is in this particular situation, and will be obviously for some time. I guess the key, I think, for most employers is the need to bring some structure to the uncertainty that all of that creates. So we have policies and procedures, old ones that will need to be reviewed, revised, and just thought about in terms of, well, what are we doing that's different, and what might that impact be? So, for example, we may have had grievance and disciplinary procedures which assumed that everybody will be on site, and maybe they won't be on site, they'll be remote working, but we can't wait for 3 or 6 months to deal with a particular issue where the employee has a grievance. How do we handle that? So we may need to think about, well, if we're doing it remotely, what sort of issues come up? For example, that we ask somebody to confirm who else is in the room with you. Maybe we would never have thought of that, because we can see who they brought to the meeting, and we can see who's here and who's not here, whereas in a remote situation there might be somebody else who's off camera. So things like that probably do bear a review, just sitting down and reading through all of the policies and procedures that are in place and thinking, is there something that we need to change, or is there an impact on this policy or procedure, or if we were applying it, would there be something different that we would need to be aware of? So the revision of the old, and then obviously also the new. There may well be new policies and procedures. There may be things in place in organisations that need to be can be adapted, but we may never have had an advanced return to work process or a return to work process. We may never have had a form like the form we need to put in place. So what do we need to do, and how do we need to do it? And we need to work through, well, when do you do it, who does it, who holds the records, what's the information used for, when do we get rid of the information, the data. All of those kinds of issues obviously come to the fore, but it's important to have some structure, because I think where we've been able in the past to say, well, this is in your contract or this is in the policy, it's been very beneficial. It's also good, of course, in terms of bringing, if you like, some level of awareness to employees in advance. So it's much better to tell people what the rules are and what the procedures are when there isn't an issue than it is when there is an issue. And I guess then there's an expectation as to how things will work, which helps everybody. Working from home is obviously, probably for most, for a lot of employers, the big issue. And I guess, it happened very quickly, so there's no expectation that everybody did it perfectly to begin with. But as it becomes a more sustained aspect of the way a business works, then there are things that we need to think about. Like, for example, the employee needs to confirm that their home insurer knows that they're working from home and that they are covered for that. And that would normally be covered, but they may well need to say that and to confirm it so that it's on the record and everybody can be sure that it is covered. The employer's liability insurance, obviously, the insurers also would need to know if you have people working from home where that wasn't part of your normal business model. There are health and safety issues around the way people are working, and are they aware, are they thinking in terms of, should they be watching out for where they put their cables, is there a trip hazard, and that may well be around giving information to people, rather than, for example, in the normal workplace, you send somebody into the office and that person will then assess the workplace for the employee, and maybe they've never had to think about these kind of things before. So it may be the case that you actually need to give them information, and there's information being developed and being promoted all the time. So, for example, the Health and Safety Authority has a web page on working from home and the kinds of issues that need to be looked at. And of course, then there's going to be equipment and facilities. Somebody was happy to work at their kitchen table for a couple of weeks, which turned into a couple of months. But what happens then if this is going to continue for another number of months? Do you need to give them other equipment, other facilities? Are they using their own laptop, and maybe you need to give them a laptop? So those things will come to the fore. And of course, I guess for a lot of people also the issue about expenses. So traditionally, an employee could be paid a small amount per day in relation to the expenses incurred from working from home. That's not a requirement that they paid an allowance. So different employers will have different policies on whether they do or they don't. And obviously, in this case, you have the office or wherever the employee would normally have worked, perhaps if they're working from home, and you still the cost of all of that. So, you know, you may not actually feel in a position to give people reimbursement for some expenses, but it may well become a question as time goes on. In terms of people not being able to actually return to work or to remote work because they have other responsibilities, then of course there are always a range of options available. Parental leave, parents' leave for somebody who's a child under a year, there's paternity leave. You could give leave of absence, of course, anyway, as an employer, and career breaks. So there are options, and if you want to put some structure around that and make it clear that it's for a particular period of time, then obviously there are rules around those kinds of leave. And of course, you know, you're free to waive the right to have the notice period, for example, that would normally be necessary in relation to parental leave if somebody needed to take parental leave. In relation to documentation, you know, so HR people, and I know there are a couple of people from the legal background on the call as well, we'll always say, you know, please keep records. You need records. You have lots of situations where people would come to us and say, you know, I had a conversation and I said this and the employee said that. And then afterwards, a different understanding of what the conversation was would appear to be held by both parties. And it would be great to have a follow-up email or a copy of the text or a note. And ideally, we've minutes of meetings and we've, you know, formal emails or letters to confirm changes in the rules and regulations around those changes or the parameters. But if you don't have the opportunity to do that, at least remember, you know, if you can, to confirm by email, so everybody's clear about what's been agreed at the time, and you've both got a reference point. And then if you need to change it, you can change it, but at least you both, both parties know where you're starting from. And copies of texts may not be the most formal, but they are still records of a conversation at a time, and they can be useful as well. And even if you're able to keep notes, brief notes of conversations that you might have had with people and what they said, that they can all be very, very helpful later on if there is a disagreement about what was agreed or what you requested. When you're working it out with employees, I think there are 5 key steps to do things, and I'm even starting it out by saying working it out with employees. I've seen a number of situations where employers are in touch with us trying to decide what to do and expecting to then just go and tell people what they were doing, who they were bringing back to work or not bringing back to work, or what way they were going to organize things. And I think actually, you know, at the best of times, you know, there's an expectation that we will consult with employees. So discuss what needs to be done before we go ahead and make a big change. But particularly in this situation, it's actually a really valuable thing to do. Number one, if you've got people out, not in the workplace, it's a really good way of keeping them involved in what's going on. And obviously solutions that are based on everybody being involved are more likely to be acceptable to everybody. And also you can have a different expectation of what the situation might be for them. And it's important to, let's say, have all of the facts. So arm yourself with all of the facts, including the employee piece, before you make a decision. So I would say number one is explain the situation to employees, whatever that is, where you know, whether it's we're only going to open, you know, half days, or we're going to roster people to come in on different days, or we've only got work at the moment for 2 people instead of 5 people. But explain what the situation is, and then say, you know, you're working up a plan, and you'd like to hear what their suggestion might be, and then listen to what the employee's issues are. You don't have to make a decision then and there, and I would say don't actually, because you need to listen to everybody, and then consider what needs to be done. Can you accommodate people, and accommodate them if you can? So I think if there's one thing that comes out of all of this, it's that we need to be flexible wherever we can, within the, you know, parameters of what the business needs to keep going. But it may well be that, you know, you'd have planned on bringing people back half time, and you discover that actually some people are really not in a position to come back at all, and other people would be quite happy to come back full time. And then if that's the decision that you make, everybody's involved in it, and hopefully the situation or the solution that you come up with suits as many people as possible. And then, you know, I guess I'm saying respond in context, and that really means to explain to people, look, this is what we're doing. This is what we've decided, heard everybody, this is the situation, heard all of our inputs from everybody, talked to everybody about it, this is what we're doing for the moment. But it is for the moment, you know, this is the plan, we'll keep it under review. It might be only for a month or 2 months. So people understand both the rationale for the decision, but also that it's not a permanent decision. It's not that you're not being brought back to work, but it's just we don't have enough work for everybody at the moment, for example. And then, of course, you know, the need to keep records is there. I think, you know, all the time for all of this, so that we have a reference point later if we need it. I guess we're seeing FAQs, and I know there are some questions there in the chat, which I guess we'll get to later on, but just in terms of big questions for people, and I just thought I could have picked the top 4 that we've known about so far, which is number 1 for a lot of people, pay reductions, the need to reduce cost to survive, and there are reductions in pay, and a lot of people have worked through those issues with their employees. And if you're doing it, you know, really perfectly, you agree it with them, and you document that, and they agree to it. I know lots of people won't have done that, but it is very, you know, it's important to be aware that would be the best practice on that. But I mentioned earlier on that, for example, there are all the normal employment obligations, continued employment legislation is still in force. So pay reductions, you need to be careful that you don't end up that somebody might, for example, end up working less than the minimum wage. And because that is still in force, and if you've got somebody who's, you know, working from home and maybe putting in extra hours or putting extra hours on site, and there's a pay reduction, you need to watch how the two of those interact to make sure that you don't fall below that threshold. Some people have experienced somebody who's refusing to return to work, and, you know, I mean, obviously it's actually fundamentally, if you've laid people off, the decision of the employer to lay people off, and then of course it's the decision that I have work and I'm now in a position to require you to return to work. If people are refusing to return to work, I would say, you know, the first thing to do is find out why, because if somebody has childcare issues, then, you know, I don't think any of us are going to expect to leave a child sitting at home alone, age 5 or 6. So we may need to be flexible with people around that, rather than turning it in automatically straight into a hard disciplinary issue that needs to be dealt with in terms of somebody refusing to come back to work when their employer is requiring them to do so. Obviously, people will have concerns about health and safety. If somebody has been out of the workplace for quite a while and the workplace has been operating, they still won't even know what's in place. But they might have seen some of the changes before they were actually left the workplace. But certainly, if your business has been closed completely, then probably will have visibility of the protocol and what measures you have in place. So it's very important, obviously, to communicate those issues in advance. And it's also important to then, if somebody has concern, talk through the concerns with them and try and alleviate their concerns, take their suggestions on board. They may well have actually spotted a really good suggestion for something or a potential problem that you need to take into account. Obviously, under the protocol, there should be a lead worker representative, and so in that case, that person may well also be able to provide information to the employer, or even that you can point that we have a lead worker representative selected, and that person is actually working with us on this. Of course, you could have somebody who's refusing to wear their PPE, and you know, look, PPE is health and safety, and fundamentally, back to the very first fundamental point I mentioned, is the responsibility to keep everybody safe at work. If you decide that PPE is a requirement, well then, you know, that really won't be negotiable. But obviously, always it's about talking to the person about what the issue is and trying to work out, well, have they a point? How do we work around the issue, and is there something else that we can do instead of, as I say, turning something into a serious issue? And I guess we have to realise that everybody's under stress and pressure at the moment, so people are possibly a little more stressed perhaps by things, and we need to try and you know, help people come through this as well. Right, screen has just frozen there. Okay, so our final slide then, I guess the most important thing really is that normal life must resume for all of us, even if it's in the new normal, which isn't actually what normal was before. So I guess first of all, we need to integrate the changes that we make into the day-to-day processes. So just as when quality became a thing in the beginning, the quality people dealt with everything, and of course then we integrated quality into everybody's job as their responsibilities. Equally, there will be things that initially need to be managed by somebody specifically, and then over time we need to integrate those changes into just the way that people do their work, rather than seeing it as something separate. So the measures that we put in place now, some of them will absolutely continue because they'll be required. Some of them will turn out to be good approaches, and good reasons will continue after the initial reason. Performance management and employee relations, obviously those issues need to be dealt with. If you've got, as I said earlier, if there's an issue for an employee, we can't wait for 3 months or 6 months and have the employee sit at home worried, concerned, unhappy about something. Equally, if there's a performance issue with somebody, then we need to talk to them about whatever the issue is. We just need to be thinking about the new way of doing that, really. Communications are going to be a big issue, and I think particularly actually where there's a mixture of people on site and not on site, because the tendency is to, we all know, you hear what's going on around you. If communications only by email and Zoom call and Teams meetings, then everybody's in the same loop. If some people are off site, the chances of them not being involved or aware are higher. So we really need to be thinking a lot more about communications. Training, perhaps training traditionally was sit beside somebody and have them show you what they do. Now there might need to be a different approach, and maybe it's doing it in a method that involves it being recorded. Maybe it's group sessions, Zoom and Teams and other web forms. But we need to start realising that some of the training that happens on site happens very informally, and we may actually need to provide more structured ways of doing that training. And of course then culture, and that's a very, very difficult issue to deal with, and we don't probably think enough about our culture. But if people are working from home for an extended period, and there probably will be requests for remote working ongoing beyond this, and in fact, as David mentioned, lots of employers where they'll think, actually, this is a really good way of doing things, and why are we all worried about everybody getting into the office and spending hours in their cars? So it is something that we will start to have to put a bit more focus on, even for small organizations where maybe there wouldn't have been perhaps the standard structured type programs you might get in a bigger organization. And finally, of course, then there's the employee well-being. It's very difficult if somebody's just coming on a call like this and you're visible for 20 minutes and you do your work at the end of the day and that's it. It's very difficult to know, are they struggling? Whereas you might have a sense of how somebody might be even just walking around the office or the shop or the factory, that there might be something wrong. So we need to be thinking about how we pick up on signals and then how we respond to those signals, and how we interact with people and how we provide support for them. And as I mentioned, this can be a very stressful time for everybody. So we need to realise that employee well-being will be impacted. And if somebody is remote working, and even if it's sort of the simplest of things, like there are 2 adults in the house and the broadband isn't brilliant, that can really make things very stressful. And there are a whole host of other things that make this whole situation very, very stressful for people. So again, trying to provide, reasonable, calm, structured ways of working for employees will be very critical. But also the piece of thinking about, well, how will we provide support for somebody? We won't be able to just take them for a cup of coffee for 15 minutes in the boardroom if they're off site just to have a quick chat. So how do we deal with that? And are there other things we should be putting in place? So I guess that's a whistle-stop tour through the various different aspects of the situation from a HR perspective. And I'm going to hand you back over to David.
Thanks, Maria. Look, obviously I'm just conscious of the time as well, and there's a huge amount of content. But one thing I just want to start is that just within the survey, and I'll probably let it go until this point, was that it's where's the positivity in the market, where do we expect businesses to go, and I suppose it is very dependent on the type of business, the type of organisation that you have. But as we said, we did a very clear spread of businesses, type of businesses across manufacturing, finance, biopharma, etc. And look, 90% of the employers expect to be back to the new normal. I suppose the intricacies of what's the new normal is the next thing. Where do we? But I suppose for everyone, for a lot of the people that a lot of people that completed the survey, they do expect by the end of Q4 into 2021 to be back. Look, just to finalise and look, just to run through this obviously in regards to the I suppose the strategy around hiring and finding talent, because look, at the end of the day, businesses need talent at the moment. Kind of just firstly, just to give you an idea of what companies are doing at present. Look, realistically, a lot of if not all of permanent recruitment has gone out the window. And I know obviously there's certain businesses, maybe in the likes of Dublin, but in the regions we see a lot of that has pulled back because companies can't commit to, and to be fair, don't have the ability to commit to people in the longer term right now. Temporary business, so that's the temporary and contracting type roles. We're seeing actually an uplift in relation to our business to that side of things, whereby you have the capacity to bring in specialized talent, whether that be from the production floor up to finance, up to engineering type roles, where they have the ability to ramp up and ramp down. We're seeing that is quite busy, and companies are pivoting to different types of services. So some of them that would have been, actually one of our clients was producing beauty products, and they're now producing hand sanitizer. We're seeing that there is a lot of activity where people are actually expressing interest to see what's going on in the market. I'd be fairly confident in this, I don't know whether that will actually play through to there being obviously a supply of high quality talent, because I think everyone is in this together. So I think people who are employed by companies, they're testing the market to see in the event that something occurs to their existing business. But I do believe that they understand and appreciate that businesses are trying to do their best. So I think there's a lot of tentative investigations as what's going on in the market. But also as well, we're seeing interview processes have changed. With temporary and contract, in a lot of cases, they'll hire the people directly on site from the interviews that have been completed by the agency. But we're getting mixed messages in relation to online interviews. We feel that it is working to a certain extent, but going back to the whole, we're finding that candidates are feeling that they're not getting a full feel of what the culture is like within the organisation. And in certain cases, to make that move to another organisation, it can become a preventative. But also as well, look, calling it a spade, people like to meet with people to just see how that general interaction works. So we expect just at the moment, there's a lot of that going on, a lot of touching base to see, well, if we do require, what's going to happen. But there's a definite uplift in regards to temporary hiring practices. In the short to medium term, we expect, look, based on where the market is going, and look, if anyone has that last ball to be able to tell what the future is going to tell, please hand it over and give us a line of sight. But look, there is a lot of positivity there. We expect that hiring practices for the next quarter will be very much rehiring people that have been temporarily laid off. And as I pushed back, as I said earlier on, there's still a loyalty to people, even though they've possibly been laid off or reduced hours, to the business that they were involved in, because it wasn't a specific decision made by leadership that has caused this issue. It's an international thing. We also feel people will return to full working hours. But I think companies are going to start, I suppose, until they start to get a real clear line of sight of where contracts are. Companies are starting to win contracts, but they're short-term contracts, because obviously future, but also as well the client does not have clear clarity in regards to how long it's going to be. And we do expect in Q4 there to be some, I suppose, permanent hiring. We expect interviews to continue on in respect to online, but we do expect the final rounds, especially regionally, will be done face to face. I'm just going to pop in, look, and it's kind of a word or a saying that I think is going to become very relevant. A lot of the larger industries actually have a number of people employed in workforce planning. I don't think every company is going to be able to do that. There's a very long, if you go online, you can find a number of different explanations, but I suppose that very simply, it's ensuring that your business has the right people in the right place at the right time, and companies are assessing their need for, I suppose previously a lot of companies would have waited to see, well, has the revenue come in, then we'll hire on a permanent basis, or we'll wait and see. But I think realistically, companies going forward are going to have to start planning for, A, B, and C. If we go to A, how many do we need, etc. So going forward, outside of being able to do that and having somebody specialized to do it, I think it's really about making sure that you have all of the tools available to you. So I suppose the key options for hiring, is I think regionally, I think permanent will still be a very clear and present requirement for companies in time to come. But I think companies are really going to start looking at the viewpoint of, fixed term contracts, bringing people in where they're not overcommitting, but also as well looking at temporary contingent workforce whereby they can ramp up if they get an order in a Monday. We're finding it that some clients have a month's requirement. They need 10 people. There's an ability to have, a shortlist of candidates ready to rock and roll. Highly skilled people can come in with specialist knowledge. For example, Maria, yourself, on the consultation side of things, whereby a business may not need the specialist services for full time for as a headcount. We're starting to see that all of the above and a mix of all of the above will be used even more going forward. And I think there'll be a rise. Permanent will still be the preference, but there will be a rise in the contracted employees who are coming in to do a specific job for a specific period. But obviously there's a view then that if the business does pick up that it'll revert back to more of that permanent type. So kind of my advice for businesses going forward is look, realistically, top talent will still be very much in demand. There's no question about that. COVID-19 or no COVID-19, you will, and there will be competition for top talent. But I suppose just a bit of advice would be is to engage, your supplier of talent. Sit down and have a chat. I know that any of the companies out there would welcome sitting down, having a conversation, because the last thing any business wants is a phone call on a Tuesday, say we need people on a Wednesday. So it allows both sides to plan effectively. It allows you to manage your candidate base or your pool of candidates a lot more effectively. But I suppose key to this is it probably allows, you as the HR person or the decision maker to assess different models that would be available to allow, I suppose, to improve efficiencies to ensure that you have the people when you need them, but also as well look at what's the most efficient way and most cost, the most cost beneficial way to do it. So kind of that's really just my summary in regards to it. I know there's a number of questions there, Maria. I know you're just going to summarize things, but I suppose from our point of things is communication is key at the moment across businesses, and be very open to, I suppose, giving a realistic feel. But look, based on what we're seeing, there's a lot of positivity based on the survey. We send that on to yourselves, but it's just planning for eventuality A, B, and C. Up to you, Maria.
Thanks, David. And I think I would echo the sentiment there about networking and reaching out to your network, other companies in the same business, and then also just networks of whoever you might know who might be out a different kind of business or whatever. I think that can be very beneficial in terms of hearing what other options there are. So I think there's a need for all of us to keep scanning the landscape in terms of what other employers are doing, and also then in terms of what basically what the how to put it, what the emerging thought are will be, apart from obviously the government regulations that will be there as well. And I would just say also, the Chamber's a great signposting organisation, so that for anyone who doesn't have the ability to pick up a phone to a particular person, there's some kind of support I need, the Chamber's a great spot to start with in terms of knowing who might be out there who could give assistance. I know there were a couple of questions there in the chat. Maybe the first one is just in relation to the issue of confidentiality. It's a really good question, and I'm sure a lot of organisations are facing this at the moment. And I suppose, back to ultimately the responsibilities that are still there in terms of confidentiality, even if people are working from home. So, I mean, I guess the first thing to do is to make employees aware that there is a need for them to basically respect the normal confidentiality obligations that they have, and to think about the situations where that might be, difficult. So that might be, for example, that if they're dealing with paperwork, that they actually, put the paperwork away in a secure location. And it's not saying that anybody's housemate might want to rifle through things, but sometimes it's about being able to say, not only is it done, but it's seen to be done. And I could absolutely say there's no way somebody could have access to whatever it might be. Having passwords on laptops, etc. So, it's not that anybody could open it up and see something, remembering to lock their screen so somebody passing by won't actually see something that they shouldn't see. And for example, things like the laptop itself, if we're on a call and the sound is through the laptop, then everybody in the house can hear what's going on probably. Whereas maybe what you need to do is think in terms of providing people with headsets. So their voice may, of course, be still heard if there's somebody in the room with them, but that probably won't travel the same way as the actual the audio feed out of the laptop would be. So it's really, I think, a matter of working through all of those issues to try and talk to individual people. Some people will have one kind of an issue and somebody else might have some other kind of problem. Somebody might say, for example, I'm building up a huge pile of paper and I have nowhere to put it. So then you might be saying, well, gosh, we need to provide for data shredding, for example, where we send you out a sack every week or every month, and we'll arrange for it to be collected and the information shredded, rather than an employee have a pile of pages sitting somewhere that they have nowhere to put them. The other question that was there was in relation to tax, and we're not tax experts, but HR people we have a finger in a whole load of different pies. So I'll give you the HR answer to this. My understanding is that it is acceptable from the Revenue Commission's point of view for an employer to pay somebody up to $320, I think it is, a day, in relation to the expenses that would be incurred by working from home, so heat and light, basically. That's an allowance, that's a tax allowance, so it's an amount the employer can give the employee. If an employer is not doing that, then I think people will be able to, or are able to, take note of all the costs that they've incurred and then claim them back against their tax, and the employer might be required then, would probably be required to produce confirmation that they haven't given the employee any compensation for that, so they haven't reimbursed their expenses. But that could be a complicated process in terms of trying to work out well what's acceptable to actually charge. So how much of the time in the day are you working, and what's the electricity bill for the month, and all of that. So I think if anybody's thinking about that issue and trying to advise their employees, that they really would be best advised to start with their accountants and tax experts and ask them for information on that. I think they were the two questions that I saw there in the chat.
Just to confirm, Maria, you meant €3.20, not 320, was it?
Oh yeah. Yes, absolutely. It's not a lot, is it? No. €3.20.
320 is.
320. Well, yeah, 320 a day multiplied by 5 days a week could still mount up, but there's no requirement on an employer to give that amount of money. It's just that it's acceptable to pay that and for it not to be taxable, just as, for example, travel expenses, going to a meeting, a training course or something like that off site would equally fall into the same category, really. So I don't think there are any further questions there. So maybe if I would just sum up, as David and I agreed that he'd started, I'd stop. But basically, just to say, fundamentally, I do think the important thing for every employer is to maintain communication and to really focus on putting in place communication, and almost to find excuses nearly for keeping in touch with people, pick up the phone, to maintain the relationship. Which is going to be very important. And then, of course, to be flexible wherever possible, to be as flexible as you can in relation to employees' own situations, because everybody personally is going to have a lot to cope with over the next few months, and it's not just all going to stop because we're in a phase where we're allowed to all go back to work, depending on whatever business we might be in. But use the networks, and I would say definitely remember that the Chamber is there as a resource. I've always found Queen and her colleagues to be really, really helpful when I was trying to find a resource for something, and I really would recommend that everybody would remember to do that too. Thank you.